all familiar to some extent with his problems and the issues that he's facing. If there was some misunderstanding about what I was trying to say last time about James Baldwin, I personally, find James Baldwin a very attractive writer. So it's not a matter of not appreciating his talent. The problem, as I've tried to express it, is where we are at the present state in American society and trying to move forward and not oppress people with a sense of negativity, that this does not allow them to function when in fact things have to some extent improved because of people like James Baldwin and others. Understanding has increased tremendously, I think, over a long period of time. The main problem in my mind, again going back to what we were arguing about or discussing, what we said last time, was since I'm older than a lot of you guys, and I remember the situations and the way communities looked a long time ago, at least in the externals, forget the problems of discrimination and things like that, which are always existed, unfortunately, in almost all environments and societies, not just America, but France and Canada and England. And I'm sure if you go down to central Mexico, you're not going to be received as Mr. Welcome person. So, these kind of things go on in any environment. I'm sure in Africa the same thing, and in the Middle East and in Asia as well. For people who differ from the general reigning social grouping, put it that way. There are always these kinds of issues. But many eons back, the social cohesiveness of some of the communities we're speaking about, at least on the surface, and that's all one can get, appeared, to my mind, to be superior than it looks like often at the present time. The institutions seem stronger, the family seems stronger, the whole way that the society within that grouping function seems stronger, and that's the only thing that I was trying to say in terms of 40 or 50 years ago. Obviously, the situation with discrimination, affirmative action, and things like that have improved and should have improved, but what bothers someone from my generation is to see the social cohesiveness having deteriorated in the process, at least on the external appearance. Maybe it didn't happen, maybe that was always the case. But somehow I don't think so. I had the impression, again, as a young person, much younger than you, that the institutions function within a given social grouping, and I want to single out any particular one, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. The family grouping function, the society institutions function, young people were not out of control, the environment did not allow gangs to just roam around at will, whatever group we're talking about. And the society, that means it's not the external society, I mean the internal society was strong enough within the community to control that sort of thing. And that to me is what's broken down. And I don't have the answer to it, but I don't think that's an improvement. Okay? That's all I'm trying to say. And I think some of this negativism has caused it. And particularly the attack on that horrible word that we were arguing about last time, Uncle Tom. People get along in any world, whether it's communist China. I can't get along in communist China if I don't look like Chairman Mao. If I don't dress like Chairman Mao, if I suddenly come in and start looking like the Beatles or something in communist China, I can assure you I'm not going to get up on the social ladder there. It's just the way the world is anywhere. If I go to Bin Laden's world and I look like me, I'm not going to get anywhere either. The fact of the matter is you have to conform wherever you are to the reigning general social expectations of the environment in which you live, if you want to thrive in that environment. I'm not saying you have to in America, you're free. If you want to thrive. I'm talking about the external things. So to some extent, we all have to compromise, accommodate. I can't just come up to this university and act, you know, in certain ways and expect that I'm going to get tenure. I don't care what racial background I am. So therefore, I think that sometimes this condemning people who are trying to assimilate, people who are trying to accommodate, is not always a healthy phenomenon. That's all I'm trying to say. I don't think that assimilating accommodation is necessarily bad, as long as your inner spirit remains free and independent. Your externals can, I think, conform to the society in which you're trying to function. You've got to function in the world that's given you. So that's what my objection is. I don't know if that's a comprehensible thing. It's developed over my whole life. I've had many contacts with many people from all the groups that we're speaking about, and I've always argued about these things with them. And I still think that's what's happened to break down the strong societal institutions. The fact that it's been emphasized too much that you can't assimilate and accommodate to the society that you're trying to function. If you're a rich man, like, what's the guy that used to own CNN, Ted Turner, or if you're like the guy up in Seattle, Washington, what's his name? Bill Gates. You can do anything you want. You don't have to conform. You don't have to go to someone else to get your salary. You know, you don't have to walk in, so-called meet the man, if you want to call it that. You can be it any way you want. No one's going to, you don't have to answer to anybody. But to get to the level of Bill Gates and these other people, who's that guy who's got the reality show with the funny hair? Donald Trump. You know, to get to that level, you really probably have to put in a lot of work to get there. It doesn't fall on you by accident. Those people are like, I'm sure when they're our age, which is why we're not like them, they're like little busy beavers. I'm probably busy. Bill Gates was at his computer probably from the time he was 15, and he even left Harvard when he was a sophomore. He didn't even bother finishing. He went home and he was so sure of himself. So these kind of people, they put their time in. We just don't see it. They put their time in. That's what society demands. So, whether you like it or not, that's the world we live. If we were all hunter-gatherers, we wouldn't have to bother. We go out and hunt buffalo, or if we go out, I was just hearing a thing about locusts in Africa. If we go out and get some land, grow our crops, do whatever we like, independent of all other people, except for the fact that other roving bandit tribes might come and beat us over the head if we had anything. And, we could write our own rule book. But unfortunately, we're stuck in this society that we created, this huge, amorphous society. And there are certain things that all of us have to do to, if we want to progress it, we don't have to. We have to, in order to progress it. So I recommend, at the time, no, I'm a jerk, I recommend doing what you have to do to get along, like Rodney King said. And if you feel you can get along without doing these things, fine. Okay, let's go over to Black Elk. We're talking about Black Elk, and some of the same problems are occurring here that we just spoke about in the little pep talk I just gave you guys, trying to explain myself as a person. And by the way, what I say doesn't matter. When you write an essay, you don't have to ape me. Noelle, for instance, doesn't expect you to ape everything I say. All she wants you to do is to show familiarity with the material and be able to discuss it in an intelligent way. In fact, if you disagree with everything I say, that's fine. I'm just trying to, as a teacher, react to it myself, because I'm not like a total robot, and I'm not like one of those puppet creatures that they used to put on their lap, those ventriloquists used to have. Howdy Doody, you don't have those people anymore. Charlie McCarthy, Howdy Doody, you guys don't have those people. You have the Muppets or something like that. We're not just Muppet creatures. You guys remember Howdy Doody? Nobody here knows who Howdy Doody was? Yeah. You know who looks like Howdy Doody? before he got gray hair worrying over Iraq, Tony Blair. He looked to me, he used to look just like Howdy Doody, actually, the British Prime Minister. Then Iraq came along and he turned into something different, but he just looks like Howdy Doody. All right, so we have a situation where this American writer in the Depression is going out to the reservation to interview this shaman, and the shaman's name is Black Elk, and this is on page 23 of your book, Roman numeral, I think. I have a different book. They keep reprinting new ones. I first met Black Elk in August 1930. Do you see that? What page is it? Roman numeral 23?
Yeah.
And I was then working at the Song of the Messiah. So apparently he had his own work that he was doing. We went to the Pine Ridge Reservation for the purpose of finding an old medicine man. You see, this is exactly like Carlos Castaneda to some extent. And this is what he's, I think, copying. And I think he read Black Elk, so he wanted to do a Black Elk for southwestern, northern Mexican, Hispanic environment. And that's what he came up with. Pine Ridge Reservation. Where's Pine Ridge? Huh?
Isn't it in South Dakota?
Yeah, South Dakota. Still there? How many? Anyone visited it? Who's driven through it? Nobody? I've driven through it. It's pretty bleak, actually. You know, you drive through those areas and they are pretty bleak. It's not like going to the Navajo reservation in northwestern Arizona or places like that. Pine Ridge is really pretty close to the end of the world in the way it appears. It's not a very uplifting presence. And it's sad in a way because these people used to be free and in their spirit were able to roam. Again, here I am with my accommodationist outlook. I don't feel that people being able to roam and follow buffalo herds was going to be able to continue into the 20th century, regardless of what the ethnic problem connected to it was. It's just that modern society catches up on these things. I mean, you don't find people in Europe following buffalo herds. I mean, you know, there are a few gypsy-like groups in Europe, but they are treated very badly. And they pay the price of their so-called gypsyism, their gypsy lifestyle. Romany may be a better word, even in countries like Europe. And that's not just Western Europe. Eastern Europe is even worse. So these roaming tribes of different kind of lifestyles are not tenable in a modern world as easily as they were previously. So I think that the Native American situation would have developed whatever happened. I know it sounds horrible because what their goals and aims were in terms of how they had learned to survive before they were overwhelmed with huge population masses that descended on them in the 19th century, were at odds with the way huge population masses function. So I'm for all restoring the buffalo, you know. In fact, the other day I was down at the Long Beach swap meet, and they were selling buffalo meat down there. It was more expensive than regular beef. The guy was saying there's less cholesterol in it. And I said, let it rip, you know, let's have buffalo meat. But I understand Ted Turner of CNN's got a corner on the market anyway. That's all he's doing is raising buffalo up on all these ranches he's buying up in Montana and these places. But the problem is buffalo are a tough group of animals to herd, and you're never really going to restore them to the level that they used to occupy because of the nature of the creature. It's tough, and it's ornery, and it's difficult to handle, and cattle are docile. So however many people want buffalo meat, in the end it's going to be a limited situation. So even the restoration of the buffalo is not going to restore the situation that unfortunately Black Elk saw end. So we say, well, it could have ended in a more gentle way. Yeah, you probably could have, if their people were gentle people. But don't forget, the United States had just been through a gruesome civil war. A gruesome civil war in which literally, you know, maybe, I don't know if it was 500,000 people were ground up into mush. These people had seen the most horrific battlefield situations. These were not like, you know, these were not little Lord Fauntleroys. These were tough veteran guys and families and others who had seen horrific slaughter. So you have to throw that into the cauldron when you say the psychology of a people. If someone, for instance, you know, preyed on something that they thought was theirs, maybe they were wrong, like raided a wagon train or ran off some horses or cattle. These were the kind of people who run after these people and, you know, go berserk. So, well, they shouldn't have been that way. you try to change that experience that made people that way. You know, again, I'm talking badly, but on the other side of it, you have to understand there was some inevitability about what occurred. It's hard to hold people responsible for inevitability. I do think that the Spanish conquest of the Americas was a more cruel affair in that it was plotted out, it was planned out, it was deliberately executed. I'm not sure that all this was deliberate except the clash of cultures that one time. Not that maybe there's some deliberate plotting, but it seems to me that when you got the decimation of the Aztecs and the Incas and all these groups, that was done with malice aforethought and in a very cruel, vicious way. This looks cruel and vicious too, but it partially has to do with clash of cultures and inevitable inability of different people to tolerate each other. I don't know if you've ever read, again, I'll keep on this vein, but I like this period of the history, and it's interesting from both sides, not just from the Native American side, but from the American side too. We look at the enthusiasm of Whitman for the West. He's really hopeful, isn't he? He thinks that things are going to work out just hunky-dory, doesn't he? He really feels that things are going to, you know, people are going to, goodwill on all sides is going to prevail, and people are going to get along in harmony, and he really has a extremely, maybe you say childish, but optimistic view of things, even in the wake of civil war. So there's that. But I've read the journals of people like Daniel Boone. You know, these people have journals that actually exist, not just in the cartoons, but they actually have writing. I recommend things like that to you kind of folks if you're interested in this sort of thing, because it's amazing to read what it was like to go over the mountains of, I guess the Cumberlands, I guess, or the Virginia, North Carolina mountain areas, and then go on into these areas in Kentucky that was just so-called virgin land, and how it looked to them like some almost paradise there, and be nothing for like 500 miles, and they would be all alone in the woods, nothing but themselves and their own abilities to survive that they would encounter there. This incredible, absolute encounter with the state of nature, if you want. You know, Daniel Boone talks about that. And he went through all that, and he finally led, after his own travels and hunting expeditions out into the Kentuckys, he led settlers out there from Virginia, North Carolina, and they set up little settlements, which were, by the way, always being attacked. And he lost several sons in those attacks, and ultimately, I mean, he didn't feel personally vindictive at all. He just was involved in a struggle for survival. And he writes about it all really straightforwardly. And ultimately, he was captured by some of the tribes that they'd been struggling with. And they honored him because he was such a, you know, formidable warrior and a brave person. And they adopted him into their tribe. And they took him prisoner, and they took him up to the Great Lakes area or someone to meet the head sort of person of all the tribes. And, you know, he was honored as a great warrior and given a Native American name and everything. And when he heard that they were going to attack the settlements that he had set down, and people were being encouraged to attack these settlements by British and French powers that wanted to undermine the United States movement westward. It wasn't just that the Native Americans wanted to attack these groups themselves, but they were being supplied and given weapons and, you know, inducements to go, and they were quite happy to do it, but to go and do this kind of thing by British agents, first of all French agents and then British agents, you know, who were not settling these areas but were trading in these areas. So he snuck back to he left the Indians and deserted and snuck back to his settlements and helped organize the defense of these settlements. In any case, to make a long story short, he lost all his property in Kentucky as he grew older through land speculators, as more civilization came and more people, you know, came through. It was a really sad story. You know, he couldn't cope with the modern world. He couldn't cope with real estate agents. He couldn't cope with lawyers. He couldn't cope with the things you and I can't cope with. And he kept getting pushed further west. And finally, he ended up in Missouri, on the Missouri River. As an old man, he moved his whole family in his 80s out to the Missouri River because that was new land. And when the Lewis and Clark, you've heard of that expedition, came up the Missouri to open up the rest of the West, one of the first person they stopped to see was Daniel Boone on the Missouri River, where he had a little homestead that he was still farming in the early 1800s. So that's an epic story, don't you think? That really is an epic, but there's no real hostility and intent to destroy anyone there. It's just a clash of cultures. The people that he's encountering in the Kentucky wilderness want to kill him. Those tribes are warring with each other too. It's just that was their lifestyle. So when people try to kill you, and I'm not saying you're justified, these kind of people like Daniel Boone responded by, he wasn't a murderous person. I don't think he ever, you know, went crazy even when his daughter was kidnapped and so on and so forth. They had to go to rescue her, etc. Worse people than Daniel Boone respond in a murderous manner too. And I think that, to my mind, is what happened in a large swath of the movement west in this country. Two cultures that were totally at odds with each other from different stages of technological development. I know this is a dumb way to put it, but this is my way of looking at it. Encountered each other. And murderousness on both sides begot even more murderousness. You say, well, no one stopped it all. No, I don't think anyone was strong enough to stop any of it. People like Abraham Lincoln, whom I do believe was a righteous man, would have tried to stop these things were they able, but they were killed by other people. So you were having social unrest within the dominant, if you want to call it, Anglo environment too, where people who tried to stand against certain things would be blown away too. So it was this inevitable sort of catastrophe that then we get people like Black Elk are the individual people within the catastrophe that are the victims of it all. But I'm sure the people like Black Elk were trying to stop the young braves from being over-aggressive. I'm sure the people in Fallujah, if they have any sense at all in their brain, whether we belong there or not, I'm not trying to get into that issue, would like to stop the hotheads from going out and hanging Americans up on the bridge there. You follow what I'm trying to say? The shopkeepers, the middle class people, the homeowners, the people who have a stake in the society, they think that they would like to, let's get a different way of going about this. Let's do this, more gradually. Let's try to get these problems worked out over the conference table and so on. Even if we don't like Americans, Uncle Sam here, let's try to work this out some intelligent way. Let's not hang them up and provoke them. Well, okay, So that's what happens, and look what happened in Fallujah in the last two weeks. I don't think there's a building standing in that place, just about. You know, that's what happens. So it isn't good, it isn't bad, but one thing, you know, inevitably provokes another thing. And it seems to me that it's usually the clash of cultures where young people are actually, maybe the testosterone makes them more aggressive than the other side is willing to bear, and then a response comes that's even worse than what the original people did. Anyway, that's one analysis of it. People like Black Elk, in any case, I think we're trying to put a lid on things, trying to get along, trying to get it, and every time they, Chief Joseph is a wonderful example. How many know the story of Chief Joseph? He is a tremendously civilized Native American chief from up in the Oregon area. I forget the name of it. I don't know if it's the Shoshones or another related tribe. They were actually the tribe that helped Lewis and Clark when they were at their last gasp get over the mountains and gave them horses. So they were always a tribe that had welcomed people. But there were younger people in the tribal group who objected to the settlers in Oregon and started being a little aggressive towards some of the settled areas and maybe taking horses or occasionally kidnapping someone or maybe getting into a fight with and killing somebody or whatever. And then the retribution was horrendous. So even people like Chief Joseph were like caught up in it, and he ended up having to lead his whole band to Canada and fighting a rearguard action with the American troops. And he was almost, people really respected him because he was so civilized and so brave. But he was almost at the Canadian border, and the U.S. Army caught him about 40 miles from the Canadian border where he would have had sanctuary, and then they shipped him off in a train someplace, and he never saw the, what's the name of that valley, that fertile valley up in Oregon? It's called the Willamette, something valley up in Oregon. Is it the Willamette? It's a name similar to that, anyway. He never saw it again in his life. Those stories are repeated over and over and over and over and over again in this saga, which bears out my point of the inevitability of it, unfortunately. When you get 100 million immigrants in a country like America coming from Europe, I don't care what country they came from, whether they came from Germany, England, Scandinavia, Hungary, Russia, Italy, Ireland. Half the U.S. cavalry was made up of Irish people who had never even been born in this country. When you get those people coming face to face with a technologically different society with totally different customs, the clash is unfortunately going to be sometimes horrendous. And that's what happened. And Black Elk explains, you know, when he takes the train back east, he can't believe what they're seeing. They can't believe, first of all, what a train is like. And they can't believe a city like Chicago. And they can't believe a city like New York. And they can't believe the ocean liners are on the ocean liners, and they're all praying that they survive. There's very moving passages in this book. But I think one of the things that Sitting Bull used to be upset by, I don't think Black Elk may mention it, was all the beggars on the streets of New York, you know, or Chicago. They would hand out from their Wild West show. They had money in their pocket from Buffalo Bill, and they would actually hand out money to some of these people because they couldn't imagine why there could be so many poor people, you know, on the streets of these huge towns. But they don't understand a modern industrial society. They don't understand that the tribal links are broken down, the family links are broken down, the allegiances are broken down. You're in an industrial morass, not just in America and New York, but in Manchester, England, and Birmingham, England. Dickens writes about London at the same time. I mean, it's a horror. Just have to read Dickens. I don't like Dickens as a writer. I think he's a maniac. But I'm going to hear his Christmas story again for the 100th millionth time in just a month or two from now. But, you know, his picture of the London post-industrialist mess is a mess. But what's that? Who's responsible for that? Post-industrial, modern, capitalist society. That's the side effects of it. You know, Karl Marx isn't going to change it. Adolf Hitler is not going to change it. Joseph Stalin didn't change it. The only way it can be changed is by the people living in it, ameliorating it slowly, by getting together and trying to deal with its most deleterious effects that we try to do here. In the meantime, you and I have to survive. So that's why I try to, you know, cut some of the anger at this stuff, because anger is never going to make you survive in this post-industrialist capitalist society doesn't care about your anger. It grinds your anger down. And so again, let's go back to Black Elk. So he goes to the Pine Ridge Reservation, and that's where Black Elk. All that has to do with seeing the effects of the Pine Ridge. That was a lecture on Pine Ridge, in case you didn't know what I was talking about. On how depressing it is to see this, what the situation finally has resulted in the modern period. Anyway, from the agent in charge at the Pine Ridge Agency, who was liked my writing, knew my Song of the Indian War book, I learned of an old Sioux by the name of Black Elk who lived among the barren hills some 20 miles east of where the agency had its headquarters, near a store of some kind of post office called Manderson, South Dakota. I'm sure if you looked on a map, you could find Manderson, South Dakota now. He was a kind of preacher, I was told. Kind of holy man, Wahasha Wakan, and had been some importance in the Messiah affair. What's the Messiah affair? We're in religious things now, so we want to worry about Messiah affair. The Messiah affair is going to be what you're going to get at the end of this book if you can read it through. I hope you do read it through as fast as you can, because I can't cover this whole book. It's too long, and you know, we don't have a certain amount of time. I'd like to read it with you always. It's fun to read together. I hope you enjoy doing that, but this is easy reading again. A lot of it is boring. And I mean, honestly, unless you're in the dance department here, how many are in music and dance in this classroom? I know one or two. Have you read this at all? Well, unless you're in the dance and music department, I think you'll find about half of the book perhaps a little bit boring. But if you're in the dance and music department, you'll find some really good choreographed stuff in here. He's into choreography. That's his main interest, is choreographing dances with music. So, if you ever go to speak to those people over in the theater arts department, please tell them that your professor in this course recommended this book as a choreography textbook for incipient choreographers. I don't know how good he is, but he seems pretty good. In any event, half of it is like that, but the other half is really interesting, you know, for everyone. Not just people with artistic interest, you know, the events, his insight into the customs of the people, and so on. So the Messiah affair is the end of this book. There was a Messiah, I think it's in the early 1890s. It's here after the chapter Across the Big Water, or Across the Big Water is about going to Europe, the Spirit Journey, the Messiah. Page 177, I guess, of your book. It's about the ghost dance and the buff and the Black Hills people, I think, and this Messiah character who starts this going. I'm sure he's gotten a little Christian influence, which is why he's got this ideology. He actually came from California. And as he says there on page 179, is it or so? I'm not sure what page it is. His name is Jack Wilson. What page is that in your book? It's the fourth page in from 179, yeah. His name's Jack Wilson. And they also called him Wovoka. His Indian name was Wovoka. But he came from Lone Pine. One of of those places up there, next to Lone Pine, someplace up there. And again, Indian's easier to say than to keep saying Native Americans, so I'll use it occasionally. The Indian leaders from different parts of the country who already suffered plenty of reverses in their encounters with the American expansion westward, which is, by the way, why we're all here. None of us would be here without those encounters. So whether you agree with them or not, you're the product of them, for good or for evil. And you wouldn't be here otherwise. So you have to take a share in the responsibility and the consciousness of it, at least. We all try to do that if we can. They all came to see this Jack Wilson, Wovoka, because he had this new doctrine that we could get rid of the usual evil person, the whites, if we could dance them out of here. And we just keep dancing, and we will dance up our dead, and we will dance the buffalo back into existence, and we'll dance away the white man. Well, I mean, that's a great doctrine, and I'm not against it. Aesthetically, it's extremely attractive, which you understand. But you all know that in the atomic age, it's not going to go anywhere in terms of being successful, except in a spiritual sense. It's going to work spiritually and revive flagging spirits, and I think it's a wonderful thing in many ways. But it's not going to achieve the goals in a technological, scientific, sociological way that it aims at. And you can say, well, the results didn't have to be as cruel as they were. Yeah, I know they didn't have to be as cruel as they were. But you're dealing with a bunch of trigger-happy lunatics in the U.S. Army who have been through lots of battles and have lost lots of comrades, whoever, in whatever war, whether the Civil War, whether some other war, and just itching to pull triggers. And you don't have a central government in Washington with all the party strife in the 1880s. I don't know how many presidents were killed between 1860 and 1900, but I think there were at least 3 of them. You probably didn't know that Kennedy wasn't the only president assassinated. Besides Lincoln, there were 2 or 3 others, and it all happened in the 1880s. And McKinley in the year 1900, and then there was a guy called can't remember his name, Garfield in the 1880s. Every 20 years they were assassinating presidents. Yeah, I mean, it's not funny actually. So in a situation of that kind, you think that the government in Washington has control of what's going on in Montana and Utah and South Dakota on a day-to-day basis without the communications setup that we even have now? It's it's unimaginable to even think that kind of control could have existed. So, what I'm saying, the massacre, as they called it, Wounded Knee, was a horrific thing. And if you see the pictures of it, because there are pictures back time, it's really a horrifying thing to see. But the outcome was not surprising of this basically innocent attempt to revive the people's spirits. So, again, it's my usual plea to just try to get along if you can and make the situation better through contact and negotiation and discussing things rather than pushing things to the point of crazy people then going out and blowing everybody away. That way it just causes tragedy for a lot of different people. Anyway, that's what happened here. And that's what he's talking about, that this Black Elk had witnessed the Messiah affair. He had been there. And the end of this book is about his participation in it. He actually, Black Elk has had enough. Even Black Elk, who's a pretty mild person in many ways. He's had enough, and he describes his participation in the Messiah affair warfare, where I think he got wounded, as I recall. He didn't get wounded. He got knocked off his horse when he tried to charge some U.S. cavalry people. But he writes about it in a good humored way. He's not really out of his mind with vindictive anger over it. He just tells about it in a almost laughing way, his own participation, because usually he didn't. So that's what he means. Now, we're 30 years down the pipeline from that. Black Elk is, by this time, a fairly old man. And Neihardt, then, is the American writer who sympathizes with Native American culture and affairs, who is sent to see Black Elk because he's heard that about this man. He said, there's something peculiar about this old man. Last week a lady came up from Lincoln, Nebraska to see him. She wanted to write an article on Crazy Horse, who was the old man's second cousin. I took her over, but the old man wouldn't talk. He's almost blind, and he squinted at her a while and said, I can see you're a nice looking woman, I can feel you're good, but I did not care to talk to you about these things. So again, we get this is where Carlos Castaneda is getting his stuff from, in some ways, the way he's received by his medicine man who smokes him, as he puts it. He's just updating it for 70 or 80 years later. Well, it was a dead-end road that led through treeless yellow hills to Black Elk's home. A one-room log cabin with weeds growing out of the dirt roof. Two old long-hairs who lived in similar cabins inside the road, mounted ponies followed us, curious to know what was going to happen. Black Elk was standing outside a shade made of pine boughs when we arrived. It was noon. Neihardt goes with his daughter, I think. I have a daughter, and I wish my daughter were as nice to me as Neihart's daughter is to him. I'd really be a happy father to have a daughter looking after me the way Neihart's daughter looks after him. If you guys ever have any daughters or sons or things, I hope you have this good fortune that Neihardt has with his offspring, because they really help him, they really take care of him. They're terribly interested in his affairs. They do all the note-taking, huh?
It depends on what kind of father you are.
Yeah, I guess it depends on, no, I don't think it depends on that. It depends on what kind of children you have. But, anyway, Neihardt's children are very dutiful to him, and he's a lucky man in terms of getting his work done, because without his daughter, I don't think he could have gotten half this stuff done. And it was noon when we left after sunset. Flying Hawk said, that was kind of funny, the way the old man seemed to know you were coming. My son remarked that he had the same impression. So he had his son with him too, not just his daughter. And when I'd known the great old man for some years, I was quite prepared to believe that he did know, because he certainly had more than normal, supernatural, or super normal powers. Shaking hands with Black Elk, I told him I was well acquainted with the Omaha Indians and many other Sioux groups, and I wanted to get acquainted with him and talk about the old times. Ah, he said, indicating that my suggestion was satisfactory to him. I had a lot of cigarettes and things, and I passed these around, and we squatted near the ponies at a respectful distance, and so on. The others did anyway, and we sat down on the ground smoking and waiting in silence, and Black Elk near blind, stared fixed on the ground, and seemed to have forgotten us. And I was about to break the silence, but I was getting started when the old man looked up to Flying Hawk, the interpreter, who had come with them, and said, speaking Sioux, but he knew, before he knew no English, says, I sit here. I can feel in this man beside me a strong desire to know the things of the other world. He's been sent here to learn what I know, and I will teach him. This is Carlos Castaneda right down the line. So that's why I tend to disrupt Castaneda to some extent, because as a sociological person, interested in anthropology and so on, he would have known all about this. He would have known about these kinds of events that had preceded. So we sat there, and he brought a sacred ornament out. I later learned it belonged to the Black Elk's father. It had a leather star tinged with blue, and the center of the star hanging a strip of hide with the breast of a buffalo and a feather from the wing of an eagle. The ornament is suspended from a leather loop to be placed about the neck, and holding the star before us, Black Elk said, here you see the morning star. Who sees the morning star shall see more, for he shall be wise. And lifting the eagle feather, he says, this means Wonkin Tonka, the great mysterious one. It also means that our thoughts shall rise as high as the eagles. Then lifting the buffalo side, he said, this means all the good things of the world, food and shelter. And then he handed the ornament to me. He said, my friend, I wish you all these things. Put it around your neck. And I thanked the old man, and I did as he directed. So I guess, I don't know, he's given him this tremendous gift right from the start. And then the old man began talking about his power vision. The vision he had had when he was a youth, basically, that governed the rest of his life. He tells him about this power vision. I'll get to the word power in a moment. And the sun was nearly setting when they finished. Blackout said, there's so much to teach you. What I know is given to me for men, and it's true and it's beautiful. Soon I shall be under the grass, and it will be lost. You were sent to save it. You must come back, and I will teach it. And I said, I will come back. And Blackout said, when do you want me? He replied, in the spring, when the grass is high. And so he talks about his daughter helping him in the next page, and that's how this book got produced. He started going back to see black elk in a continual manner, and this is the product. Now, how many have been looking at this book? I think it's a great book. Now, I may be wrong. I don't know what you guys think. I think this is a great book. Now, the question is, how much of it is really black elk and how much is Nyhart? The same as before with the Carlos Castaneda, Don Juan, but even more here. Nyhart's a really good novelist. Now, one thing I do want to caution you, and that is, I think that there's some Christianity creeping into this book. Now, that's not bad or good, I'm just saying that as a fact. Because it seems later in life, Black Elk converted to Christianity, of a Catholic kind of Christianity from the monks and different people who are out in that part of the world carrying on their missionary activities. And he got into the church in some ways. Now, what is relationship with the church? There's some articles actually on the internet. If you Google them up, you'll see articles about it. These things don't particularly interest me for the purpose of what I do in this class, but they might interest you if you're interested in this sort of thing. I don't know exactly what his relationship with the church was in later, when he got really older, and whether he was still interested in that when he told all these stories to Nyhart. But there may occasionally be some of that creeping in you. So the visions may be influenced by biblical things that he's read. And his memory of them may be influenced by that in some way. I'm not sure always, like the four horsemen of the apocalypse in the Revelation book and stuff like that. Whether that's influencing his memory or not, I can't tell you. That's the only external force. Plus, Nyhart's obviously cleaned it up a lot and made it into a nice whole. So Nyhart was a novelist and a pretty good writer, apparently, as we can see here. So that's the only other thing impinging on us. The rest is really, as I said, even Native Americans read this book to find out things that they have forgotten about their own culture. I don't know if you saw that movie. There's been quite a number of Native American movies that have been out over the last 10 or 20 years. They're not really, Smoke Signals, for instance, was one. They don't get in general release in like some of these other movies that are popular out there. I can't remember the names of popular movies. But they have a certain run. And how many saw Smoke Signals? That was a pretty good movie, wasn't it? And there was another one before that you may have missed called Rockabilly Highway. How many saw that one? No one saw that one? It's about some Native American guys up in Pine Ridge or one of these reservations, near Wounded Knee, one of these places, and you know, they get in a car from a junkyard, and one of them's got a sister down in, I don't know, someplace off the res, as they call it. I think she's down in New Orleans or someplace like that, I forget where. Maybe Santa Fe, one of these places, yeah, maybe Santa Fe. Anyway, they gotta go down and help her out because the cops down there are trying to hang a drug charge on her and stuff like that. But anyway, before they go out down there, and it's all about how they go down there and rescue her in this crazy car that they've got from the junkyard that becomes their horse, if you like, their battle horse. It's quite a funny movie. And quite entertaining. If you ever get a chance to rent it, I recommend it, called Rockabilly Highway. Well, they want to go out to this Sioux holy site to get their trip blessed. And they go out to this mountain, apparently, that all the Sioux still kind of worship as a holy site, and they go up on this mountain. And when they go out there, the guy is either stolen or run out of a music store with some really good high fidelity music, but also receiving equipment from other vehicles. What do you call those things on the highway that you can talk back and forth with each other? What are they called? CB radio type stuff of a high quality. So they're out there driving on the highways in the middle of the United States, and then you get this guy from driving a big semi or something like that coming the other way, and he calls it, he identifies him. I can't remember the name, so I've lost the point of the story in that sense. But you'll come upon him. He calls himself something Wind or whatever it is, out of someplace in I don't know, Colorado or South Dakota or someplace. He's driving this big semi, and he's the voice of this spirit person here in this book here. So it's quite clear that they have actually read this this book and know the names of the big medicine men of this book here. And it's the name of one of the medicine men in this book that this spirit voice in this other truck identifies himself as. So if you've read Black Elk Speak and then you suddenly hear that in this movie, you say, oh my God, I know where he's getting that from, because he uses the name to give spiritual messages to these guys in the car from this CV. It looks like it's coming from heaven. And so the medicine man is speaking through this, what's it called, CV? Is that what it's called? CB? Yeah. What's that stand for? CB? Citizen Band. Citizen Band, okay. So he's speaking through the Citizen Band radio, and it sounds like a voice out of, so when I come to that name, I'll point it out to you. But that's a good movie if you want to see another good movie about Native American, subject made by Native American movie makers. So,
what was that called again?
Rockabilly Highway. It doesn't sound like it's any good from the title, but it's a really good movie. It's really entertaining. It's just fun. How many have seen it? Am I the only one? Well, you get that, and then you'll see this one thing I told you where they go to the holy site, but they're told to go there by this medicine man who's talking to them through the CB radio. It's pretty good. Okay, so look, Black Elk is speaking here about the way things began. All life is holy and good. The grass on the hills and things like that. This is not the tale of a great hunter or a great warrior, but it's something that I can look back on now from a lonely hilltop. I'm summarizing the first page or so. I know it was the story of a mighty vision. It's a story of a vision. This is a religious book. I'm okay to read it in this class. That's why I am reading it. Given to a man too weak to use it. Now, my big critic fella is gone here, so we can't argue in these points today. But you see, he has a different attitude. He doesn't blame the society so much. Who does he blame? Himself. He said, I was given the vision, but I was too weak to save my people with it. He doesn't say, oh, I blame Washington, D.C., Custer. Oh, we all know those people are blameworthy in some way. But, it isn't just all bitterness that comes through here. There is bitterness. bitterness is of a different kind, which is, again, my worry about some of these other expressions of bitterness. We all may be, hey, I got people in my own family who are bitter over certain things that happen to them in life. Almost every family, I'm sure you got people in your family, whatever your family is, that are bitter about something. There's bitter people. Life makes bitter people all the time. That doesn't really do the next generation a lot of good to pass on bitterness all the time. It's sometimes good to pass on a little, uplift. Black Elk does pass on uplift, even though he's been through the most horrendous times, but also he blames himself. He said, I failed. I failed. I didn't fail because of anything that was stacked against me as such. I just wasn't strong enough to deal with the vision I was given. I was given a splendid vision that could have saved my people, and I was not strong enough to know how to use it. Now, that's a very sad thing for an old man to say. But you see, in a way, through this book, he hasn't failed. Because maybe he knew, as he said, that this man was coming and was going to save his vision so that we could see his vision for him. And that's what he's done in some way. Now, Neihart maybe have helped him. Maybe Blackheart knew that Neihart was going to help him. Whatever happened. So, I think as we read this book, we don't think Black Elk's a failure. In fact, we think Black Elk's done tremendously well with what he started with, the equipment he had, the situation he found himself in, and what he's left us all. So this is really quite a success story as far as his book is concerned. I failed. I was too weak to use it. If a holy tree that should have flourished in people's hearts with flowers, see, his vision is very sweet and touching. He's not an angry person in that sense, even though he seems bad things. And it's now withered, and a people's dream died in the bloody snow. What's he talking about dying in the bloody snow? Well, wounded knee, what I told you about. Wounded knee is the name. I don't have to write that on the board. You know how to spell wounded knee, K-N-E-E. This is where the final end of the ghost dance from the Messiah that he's going to describe at the end of this book took place, where the U.S. soldiers, black and white together, opened fire on the dancers and the people who were causing the dancing for whatever reason, and wiped them out basically, which ended the ghost dance, and as he's concerned, all hopes. But as I've been trying to say from the beginning, I think the ghost dance was a forlorn hope to begin with, even though spiritually it was probably a invigorating thing, a positive thing, but that it was going to actually end up dancing the buffalo back to life, and all the dead back to life, and the white men away, probably wasn't going to happen with 100 million white men from Europe having come here in the 19th century. But if the vision was true and mighty, as I know it is true and mighty yet, you see, but I still have hope. Because the vision was true and mighty, and it is still true yet. Such things are of the Spirit, and the eyes get lost. So I know it's a good thing what I'm going to do with you, Neihart. So before we start, let's make an offering. Here, let's fill the sacred pipe here with the bark of red willow, and let's smoke it together. And now I'm going to explain this pipe to you. He has another book on the pipe, by the way, if you're interested in Black Elk. Not as good as this one. These four ribbons hanging here on the stem are the four quarters of the universe. This is how the pipe is made among the people from his part of the culture frame of the plains. So the black one is the west. Why is it black? That's where the thunder and the rain comes from. Where the thunder beings live to send the rain. Not a very sophisticated view of scientific weather technology, but that's the way I'm sure mankind saw it for maybe 600 million years before our modern centuries started doing the more technological analysis of these things. The white one is the north. Why? Because there's snow up there. Obviously. Whence comes the great white cleansing wind? The red one, the east, sunrise. where the spring's the light and the morning star lives, and the yellow for the south, where everything gets burned out in the summer heat. For the summer and the power to grow. So those are the colors. Of the, what are these, feathers? That are ribbons that are attached to this pipe. And I think this pipe was given to Nihar. We have a picture of him with the pipe at some point in this book. But these four spirits are only one spirit, after all. And this eagle feather is the one which is like a father. And it should rise as high as eagles. Is not the sky a father, the earth a mother? Are not all living things with feet or wings or roots their children? And this hide upon the mouthpiece here. It should be bison hide, buffalo hide. It's for the earth, from whence we came, and whose breast we suck at babes. Because it means all this, and more than any man can understand, the pipe is holy. So, he has now described to you what? The pipe, the peace pipe, if you want to call it that, that was so famous in these relations between peoples at that time on the plains. But now he's going to tell the story of how the pipe was brought. The sacred story of the bringing of the pipe. So you see, he has all these legends that probably would have been forgotten had he not told them to us. So he's telling us, what's the story, how is the sacred pipe brought? I'm reading this book quicker than you are. Hey, you guys got to work with me. I'm not the only one who's working in this class, I hope. I don't put a lot of work on you except the few things you write, which is going to, you've all agreed we're going to have a test a week from today. We'll try to cover as much as we can by that time. So, which will be like your midterm, your first test. But we'll talk about that next time, unfortunately. The least interesting thing to talk about, tests. What's she called, the young woman who brings the pipe? White Buffalo Woman, I think. Her name is White Buffalo Woman. And she's this virginal, perfect being who appears. And he describes her here. One day, not long ago, or very long ago, these young men, scouts, were out looking for buffalo herds. And they saw a woman coming towards them from way off. And they spoke to each other, and one had good thoughts and one had bad thoughts. And this was a sacred woman. And she came closer, and she wore a fine white buckskin dress, and her hair was very long. And she was young and very beautiful. This is a vision here. It's not his vision, it's a tribal memory. And she knew their thoughts, the evil ones and the good ones. You do not know me, she said, but if you want to do as you think, you can come with me. And the foolish one went. But just as he stood before, there was a white cloud that came and covered them, and the beautiful young woman came out of the cloud. And when it blew away, the foolish man was a skeleton covered with worms. He had wanted to have carnal, there's a bit of Christian thing in this, it seems to me, carnal intercourse with her. And this is what happened to him. He was turned to dust. I didn't happen to Kobe up in the Colorado motel room, but it happened to this guy here when he got too close to white. I guess that wasn't White Buffalo Woman up in the motel room, I guess. If it had been, we wouldn't have had to have a trial up there. But anyway, you guys don't like my humor, I see. That was supposed to be a joke. It would save a lot of courtroom cases if this could be, and we'd be in good shape here, I can tell you. In any case, the other one then is frightened to death by this time when he sees what happened to his mate. He says, "Go home and tell your people I am coming. Get the village ready for me, hotshot, because I'm White Buffalo Woman and I'm coming to your village." And this guy runs home as fast as he can to tell everyone to get things ready for the White Buffalo Woman is coming. This is a great story because I've already sketched it out and you will never forget it now. Even though I told it to you, you haven't even read it, but it's a great little story. So he goes running home and get a big teepee and put it in the center of the nation, and she came and they started singing. We're beginning to get the choreography here, by the way. And then he even knows the song she sang. I don't have the music to the song, but it goes something like, With a visible breath I am walking, a voice I am sending as I walk. In a sacred manner I am walking. With visible tracks I am walking. In a sacred manner I walk. So we're getting the chant here. Gives you the lyrics. And out of her mouth came a white cloud that was lovely to smell. And she gave something to the chief, and it was the pipe with the bison calf carved on one side to mean the earth that bear and feeds us, and the 12 eagle feathers hanging from the stem. So she gives the pipe to the tribe. Behold, she said, with this you will multiply and be a great nation, and nothing good shall come from it, but nothing but good will come from it. Only the hands of the good should take care of it, and others shall not even see it. And then she sang again and went in out of the teepee. And as the people watched her going, suddenly she was a white buffalo galloping away and snorting, and soon she was gone. And it's another one of those Carlos Castaneda people turning into animal stories, right? So she's gone. And now I light the pipe and offer the powers of the power to you. And hey, 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 Grandfather Great Spirit. So you see, you've got here all the trappings of someone telling you what the traditions are. If you've forgotten the traditions, here they are, right here, all set down to some extent for you. I'm sure there were more, but this is at least some. Well, anyway, take this white buffalo. This white buffalo is still sacred among many of these Plains Indians. I don't know how far even stretching down into New Mexico. And I don't know if you know, but I always tell the story to my class recently, and it gets less recent as I tell the story. Maybe 10 years ago or so, maybe 15. A white buffalo was born to one of these guys who's raising buffalo meat. You know, there's a lot of farmers who are raising this buffalo because it is good anti-cholesterol meat, and it is very good tasting. As the guy in the outdoor market was telling me there next to the Long Beach Marina on Sunday, he's got a stand there. I even took I've got in my pocket the prices he's got for the buffalo meat. One of these guys raising this stuff, I think it was in Wisconsin. A white buffalo was born to one of his buffaloes. I mean, it happens pretty periodically because that's really like, I guess what we call an albino. And the word got around that he had a white buffalo in his corral or whatever fenced area, whatever you call that area that they would be keeping the animals in. And after time, it spread all across the country, and he would have people coming all the time. American Indians, Native Americans, coming to his fence, driving there to see the white buffalo calf. And you can go out on his farm and there'll be people, just looking quietly, watching the white buffalo. And these things are sacred in people's minds even to the present day. I don't know, by the way, what happened to that white buffalo. Maybe you could Google them up and you'll find out. I'm not a big Google person, but I know all my students are Google people. So I'm sure you could find out. And maybe if you do find out what happened to the white buffalo, you would tell me. Before you run off, let me just get into the next chapter. I am a Lakota of the Oglala Band. My father's name also was Black Elk, and his father before him. I was the fourth to bear it. He was a medicine man, and so were several of his brothers, and he and Great Crazy Horse's father were cousins, having the same grandfather. Well, they're not that closely related. He's not a second cousin. This is about an eighth cousin or something like that. My mother's name was White Cow Seas, and her father was refused to go, and her mother Plenty Eagle Feathers. And I remember my mother's mother and her father. My father's father was killed by Pawnees, you see, not whites. When I too was too little to know, and his mother Red Eagle died soon after, and I was born in the moon of the popping trees on the Little Powder River in the winter when the 4 crows were killed, 1863. And I was 3 years old when my father's right leg was broken in the Battle of the 100 Slain. Okay, so we have a date there. And I have a footnote. That is December 21st, 1866. It's called the Fetterman Massacre. It wasn't really a Fetterman. What happened was, it says near this Pinot Creek. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Colorado. But if you go on super highways that go down that part of Colorado next to the mountains, that, you know, basically all of Colorado is underneath the mountains, and up in the mountains are just places that people like Kobe Bryant get in trouble. But down in the valley there is where all the people live, you know. There's this big highway. Have you guys been on that highway? Well, if you drive that highway, you'll come to this place where they had this Fetterman fight. And Fetterman was a guy who was a captain or something in the U.S. Army, and he was raring to go. And what the Indians did is something what happens in Iraq now. They lured this contingent of soldiers out by, you know, sending a weak party out in front of them that he thought he could take care of. So he got all excited and got all his troops to run after them. And then when they went over the hill, there was this other group waiting for them, and they wiped these 100 American soldiers out in what became known as the Fetterman Massacre in 1866. And if you're driving on that road that I'm telling you about, north of Denver, you'll see the sign. You'll see the sign, Fetterman, site of the Fetterman Massacre. You go and take a look at that sometime if you're on that road. In any case, that's when he was 3 years old. So he lived until the day he died, which was around the time that Bigfoot was and his people were killed, and we buried him there in the Wounded Knee in the hills. So I remember the winter of the 100 slain. So you remember these things by events of that kind. I'll let you go in a second. Let me get this last paragraph here. I have never seen a Wasichu then, and did not know what he looked like. But everyone was saying the Wasichus were coming, and they were going to take our country and rub us all out, and we should all have to die fighting. And it was the Wasichus who got rubbed out in that battle, and all the people were talking about it for a long while, but 100 Wasichus was not much if there were others and others without number, as he finally found out, that are coming. And I remember once I asked my grandfather, and I said, when the scouts come back from seeing the prairie full of bison somewhere, the people say the Wasichus are coming. The strange men are coming to kill us all. They say the Wasichus are coming. What does this mean? And he would say, there are many. What's a Wasichu? Well, it's also, there are black Wasichus too. I want you to understand that. I'm not trying to hurt the black Afro-Americans by saying that, but a Wasichu is everyone who's non-Indian. And it doesn't matter if you're a white or a black, or any other color in between. We were all looked upon as Wasichus. And he talks about the black Wasichus too, who he, as I said, they're particularly frightened of. And, but mainly, of course, they're the whites, I grant you that. But the Wasichus are really the foreigners, the outsiders, the interlopers, us. Us except for Native Americans in the room. Pick up there next time. Try to read it, because I got to get through this quickly, and we're going to keep on moving. Thanks for tolerating our discussion.